If you're like us, you're probably tired of flipping through outdated and expensive regulation books and struggling to understand the rule or guidance you're after. eRigs is the first web and mobile app version of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, helping fleets of all types and sizes better access and understand their regulatory obligations. eRigs is always up to date and allows fleet safety professionals to not only read the rules, but also dig into FMCSA guidance and learn more about complex regulatory topics from industry experts. Highlight, bookmark, and take detailed notes right from the app and access them on any of your devices. And easily share a digital version of the regulations with your drivers so that they too can better understand the rules. eRigs was developed by safety professionals for safety professionals. Try it out for free at erigs.app. All right. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 61 of Trucksafe Live, a show where we and our guests tackle the hot button issues impacting highway transportation. I'm Brandon, Trucksafe, Childress Law, both of which are dedicated to helping motor carriers develop and maintain cutting-edge safety programs. Got Rob Carpenter, Brian Runnels with me today. Guys, what's up?
Not a whole lot.
Howdy, howdy.
Happy, what's today, Thursday?
Close enough to the weekend day?
Getting close.
Take tomorrow.
Take tomorrow off. Wish I could.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, welcome everyone. If you're here with us live, say hey in the comments. Love to see who's around. Thanks for being with us. It's been a while since we've done one of these shows, guys. It's been a few months. Excited to get back to it. Got a lot to talk about, and we kind of wanted this show to just be an update of some of the major things that have happened since we last did a show a couple of months ago. So that's going to be what we do. We're going to walk through some of the hot button issues that are going on in the industry, and also just kind of a Ask Us Anything show. If anybody tuned in live has any compliance questions or questions about some of these topics that we're talking about, throw them in the chat or the comments or wherever you're watching, and we'll bring them up and talk about them. So excited to do that. You ready to roll here, guys?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Before we get into the specific topics, I wanted to hit on a few things going on at Trucksafe. There's quite a bit going on at Trucksafe that we should talk about. Several updates. Company-related updates. First of which is that we rolled out a new website here within the last couple of months. A completely revamped website with a lot of great free compliance content available for fleet safety professionals. Anybody looking to better understand these complex rules, just go to our website, check it out. We've got all kinds of articles. We've got all kinds of free videos, courses. We've, of course, got our Trucksafe Network, which I encourage everyone to join. This is free to join over at trucksafenetwork.com, or scan that QR code. We've got an app for it that you can download, and it's a community of fleet safety professionals to gather together, learn from one another, ask questions, and also access all of that content. Free to join, trucksafenetwork.com. So check out that website, trucksafe.com. Another thing worth mentioning is our upcoming Fleet Compliance Boot Camp. This will be our 5th annual Fleet Compliance Boot Camp, our 2-day in-person conference where we talk about nothing but DOT compliance and best practices and how to build a better compliance program. This year's is going to be September 16th through the 18th in Indianapolis, downtown Indy. Me, Brian, Rob, Jared, Tyler, the whole team's going to be there, and we're looking forward to that. You can check out the details over at trucksafebootcamp.com. You can register there. We hope to see you there. We usually end up with about 100 or so fleet safety team members, insurance professional, risk advisors in attendance. Always a great networking event, continuing education event. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
What else? New venue this year, too.
Yeah, new venue this year. It's going to be at the Crown Plaza, Union Station, downtown Indianapolis. Pretty cool, historic building. It's got some old school Pullman train cars inside the building that are actually, you can book those as rooms. They've got them built as rooms, and we're also going to have our reception kind of by those. So it should be pretty cool. It's right by Lucas Oil football stadium. So right in the middle of downtown, close to the airport. You guys looking forward to that?
Yeah, it's usually a pretty good time. But do we have any drivers coming? I haven't looked at that. We had some last year.
That's a good question. I mean, we're about half full now. I haven't really looked. I haven't really dug in to see where these folks are from. But yeah, we had a good mix last year. Brian skipped out on us though last year, but you're going to be there this year, right, Brian?
I will be there this year. Yeah.
Okay. Two other things with Trucksafe here. We launched a new subscription product called Fleet Compliance Plus. This is available on our website for any fleets that are interested. This is a monthly subscription that will get you access to exclusive content, exclusive webinars, access to all of our online courses that cost that are flat fees normally, but it's included with Compliance Plus subscription, along with fleet data about your particular fleet, pulling data and kind of analyzing it. A lot of helpful stuff for fleets to have access to. That's called our Compliance Plus platform. It's available on trucksafe.com if you're interested. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight a new service that we are offering. We partnered with a company called ELP Ready to launch this, the first conversational AI-based English language proficiency test. It's pretty cool. I mean, we've kind of put it through the ringer in terms of testing it out. And it's the easiest way that we've found to ensure your drivers for your fleet are fully compliant with the English language proficiency requirements, and that you have some certifications to back that up in their DQ file. It's quick assessment that you send to them to their phone via email, and they the system interacts with them. It has a conversation with them, kind of simulates an actual roadside inspection, how these actually play out in roadside inspections, asks them to answer certain questions, shows them some road signs, and asks them to explain what they are. Driver does that on their phone, takes about 5 minutes. System records their responses, so you have the audio available, and then it assesses them, their English proficiency, and gives you a certificate of their completion, whether they passed or failed. And then, just an easy way to keep yourself compliant with the English language proficiency requirements and have evidence to back that up. So check that out. elpready.com is where you can find more information on that if you are interested. All right, that was a lot about us. Did I miss anything there, guys, that we should talk about?
I don't think so.
All right.
That's everything.
Cool. Well, then let's see here. We've also got a bunch of other people here joining us. Let's give everybody their 5 seconds of fame here. Appreciate you all being here with us. Uncle Jesse. I wonder if that's the real Uncle Jesse. Probably not. Okay. Moving then into today's topics. I've got a list of about 5 or 6 of them that I think we should hit on, of course, as we go along. I'm sure other things will come up, but these are some of the big safety/compliance related news stories that have come out over the last couple of months. The first one I want to hit on is kind of the elephant in the room, and this is Rob's escapades that he's been on over the last couple of months, including on national television somehow. Rob ends up on a 60 Minutes episode, so I want to show a little clip of that, and then we'll break it down. So here's the clip.
Tonight, the results of an 8-month investigation into a dangerous scheme many Americans have never heard of, a scheme that may be putting all of us at risk on the road. Our investigation took us to truck stops in Florida and sources in Europe to examine what are called chameleon carriers, commercial trucking fleets often foreign-owned and operated that shed one identity for another after racking up flagrant safety violations and flouting federal regulations. Our reporting focused on Super Ego Holding, a network of commercial trucking and leasing companies based in Serbia and the U.S. It's currently under federal investigation and named in a class action lawsuit. Regulators and former employees call it one of the most notorious chameleon schemes, a ticking time bomb on our nation's roadways.
Chameleon carriers are basically a network of companies, and they constantly reincarnate. And the idea is we are revenue focused. We are going to start this trucking company. We are going to run it into the ground, just make as much money as we possibly can.
Rob Carpenter has been a trucker for 25 years. He now is a trucking safety consultant and has been tracking chameleon companies, which have surged since the pandemic. Chameleon carriers.
So that's pretty wild. Rob, why don't you kind of break that down for us, how that came up, what it was like, what the show was about for folks who haven't seen it?
But it was like a 7-hour deal on video. I think we did 4 hours with Bill Whitaker and 2 hours in the truck, and it ended up being, I don't know, less than 5 minutes of my part. But it had started before that, because there was an investigation, obviously, that we took part in before that, and then we kind of consulted on it throughout. And then one day they just said, "Hey, you know a little bit about this, so why don't you just do the interview?" So that's how it came about. That's how it came about.
What was the process like? I know you've given me some kind of behind the scenes looks at it. They made you wear makeup, I heard.
Yeah, that was, I gotta say, that was the first time I've ever done the makeup thing. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I came home, my first thing my wife said is, what is that on your face? And I was like, well, they only gave me one wipe to get it off, and there was just so much on there. But it was pretty interesting experience. I mean, I've never done anything like that. I mean, I've been on some shows, but never to the extent of having my hair done, and I don't even comb my own hair. So,
we don't make you wear makeup for this show, so.
No, I'm pretty enough. But it was pretty interesting. I mean, I would never been a big CBS guy. Like, I probably haven't watched CBS in 30 years, and I got a better outlook on them than I had before. They're pretty good people to work with.
So for people who didn't catch the episode, number one, you should go catch it. It's on YouTube, and you can also find it on CBS's pages. But Rob, give them a breakdown of kind of what was the focus of the episode and what was your part in that.
So it was really about super ego, which it didn't start necessarily as super ego. It started as chameleon carriers in general. And then obviously super ego they've got a lot of lawsuits. But one of their biggest one is a class action from drivers where they're basically withholding pay. And this isn't new to the industry, right? We've had leasing issues within the industry, even without being chameleon carrier forever. I mean, Brian, you probably remember, I think it was 2 years ago, where the leasing task force recommended totally disbanding lease agreements altogether. We still have them, obviously, but I don't know that I've ever seen a successful one. But that's really the root of how it started. Basically, these people will start, they'll work, they'll make $10,000 a week gross, and they might come back owing $44 at the end of the week. So really, it's a lot more about exploitation of these drivers than it is anything else. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that in terms of highway safety and the fatalities and injuries that go along with the crashes from these companies, because they don't really operate with traditional compliance programs, if they have one at all. So that's a big issue. But there's the employment issue as well, where drivers are working a lot of hours. Some cases, supposed to be 70 hours a week, but there were some ELD manipulation pieces to this case too. So they're working in some cases more than that, and then owing money at the end of the week. So in general, that's kind of how it flowed, and what we went over.
Yeah. So really an expose on chameleon carriers as a whole, which have been in the spotlight recently. Anyway, I mean, we did a whole show on it not too long ago. If anybody's interested in getting a better handle on chameleon carriers, I recommend you check that out. But yeah, big issue, growing issue in the industry with fleets that get shut down or run into safety issues, systemic safety issues, and then to just try and avoid the blowback because of that, they just shut down and then they reincarnate as a different motor carrier. Obviously, a big problem that we need to get a hold of as an industry as a whole. And I think the FMCSA, to its credit, is starting to look at new ways to tackle that problem. Because as we talked about on that last show, the sophistication of chameleon carriers has has really grown exponentially over the last few years. I mean, in the past, I don't know what your guys' experience was, but you'd hardly ever kind of see the types of things that we're seeing now in terms of the reincarnation of these carriers. In the past, it was literally the carrier would get like an unsatisfactory safety rating by the FMCSA, and then they would just open up a new shop. And it was pretty easy to spot them because they would use the same equipment. It would be the same owners. It would be the same phone numbers and all of that. But now the criminals are wise to those things, and they're starting to have to develop new ways to get around those checks. So
I think a big part of it, and Brian probably remembers this more than me. He's a little bit younger than me, but when ICC was here, I mean, most people don't realize FMCSA didn't start till 26 years ago, and before that, we had the ICC. Then we had a little gap there where there was really nothing. But um, during the ICC days, that group kind of had to agree to let you into the trucking industry. So you went from like 17,000 approved carriers by their fellow carriers, letting them into the organization of trucking, or the Brotherhood of Trucking, I should say, at that time. And now you've got 700,000 who've been let into the industry. I mean, you obviously got, you've got a 21-day waiting period, but I'd like to think that there's a reason there was only 17,000 allowed in then versus 700,000 allowed in now. So the barriers to entry had a lot to do with it, not just from the driver's side that a lot of people talk about, but the carrier side especially.
Brian, what are some of the new tactics that you're seeing that are leading to these types of problems?
Well, one of the things that, when someone goes and buys a new DOT number, they're not just buying one. They're buying 10, 20, just because, Brandon, you and I are here in Indiana, and one of the things that when the new law was written by the governor here was looking in that area at Greenwood where there's 250 homes.
I wish I had
like,
that map.
Yeah,
in one neighborhood.
Yeah, University Park, Indiana, not Chicago, but University Park, Indiana, which is down around Greenwood. There were 250 homes in this neighborhood, and there's like 400 and some DOT numbers registered in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
So,
crazy.
they're buying multiple, and then the shell game that they're playing with the equipment. Somebody's brother owns the leasing company, or somebody's cousin owns the leasing company, and the trucks go here and then they go back to the leasing company, then they go over here. They're making it a little bit harder to trace that type of stuff. And then I think I saw the one lately was maybe it was in that piece, Rob, with basically the scratching of VIN numbers and the duplicating of VIN numbers.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you figure out what they're doing, they're already 3 steps ahead on what they're gonna do. And I don't know if with the manpower that the FMCSA has now, I don't know if they'll ever get a true handle on this. They're outnumbered.
I put out a Substack. I think it was, I don't know, maybe Tuesday, but it breaks down. There's a network, and I wrote, I think, 3 articles on this Romanian guy, Dragos, down in Florida. I'm not even going to get into that on this show because we could go all day on that. But anyway, he was closed. He's got $1 million worth of fines, and this company was closed. But one of the things that I started doing was tracking these VIN numbers, right? So he had 10 cases of fatal crashes, right? And when I look at these VIN numbers, you can actually watch them float to a guy who bought the debt, which is another European guy. And then he transfers the vehicles to another company that's now owned by the former COO of Dragos's shutdown company. So you've really got this extension of like equipment that's floating from one dead entity to a rental company or some kind of holding leasing company to a new entity that's really owned by the former executives of the other company. So there's so many different ways that they play this thing, but it's
I
getting
found
worse.
one of the interesting things on the chameleon carrier thing was the overseas dispatch, and the new laws that are going to attempt to get rid of that. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I've seen it with my own eyes. That especially in that Chicago area, there's a lot of monitors on the wall, and those monitors are closed circuit TVs right into somewhere in Europe that they've got all their back office stuff going on.
Yeah, that may be the worst kept secret in trucking right there. The ELD fraud and all of that stuff, for whatever reason, a lot of it is kind of, the bullseye is over the Chicago area. But, so a lot of these kind of fraud issues are clearly in the spotlight, making national news. FMCSA is aware of that. But to your point, Brian, and I think this was featured in the 60-minute episode, just FMCSA perennially short-staffed. I think they mentioned on that episode they've got 350 investigators for the roughly 700,000 trucking companies in the United States. So big issue that they're going to have to figure out how to tackle, and I don't know how they really do that unless they start to get more resources from Congress to be able to supplement their existing workforce. But, yeah.
Well, I think it goes deep, too, when you, and we'll probably talk about this later, the whole self-certification of everything. Nobody's going to take advantage of that. But some of them are creating their own ELDs. And to your point, Rob, about manipulating ELDs, when you build your own and say, oh yeah, it's perfectly legal, no problem, everything's great, and you get rubber stamped, then, and I was sitting here thinking, I wonder if they're doing that with the medical examiners as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Okay. Moving on then to the next topic I wanted to mention, which was, pull this up. We just put out an article on this. Latest announcement from FMCSA that it will be withholding over $73 million in highway funds from the state of New York after concluding that they failed to revoke non-compliant, non-domiciled CDLs and CLPs following their audit, which found that of the 200 or so non-domiciled CDLs that they sampled issued by New York, 107 of them were issued improperly. That's more than a 50% violation rate. And this, of course, follows on the heels of the agency's decision to withhold roughly $160 million from the state of California for similar reasons earlier this year. So big crackdown by the FMCSA on the states in terms of their handling of these non-domiciled CDLs. So that's continuing to dominate the kind of regulatory news here is FMCSA's handling of non-domiciled CDLs. So much so that we're starting to see that trickle down, and we're starting to see state legislation on the same topic. So just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on current status of the non-domiciled CDL issue.
When it first came out, my first thought was, where is North Carolina in this? Because I think there's a lot of states that are looked at, like New York, California, Minnesota, Illinois, but you've got some other states that aren't really talked about that much. And North Carolina, I think their rate was 54% were illegally issued, and there was some discussion to withhold their funding one time, and I don't know what happened to that discussion, but I think it's happening in every state, or generally in most states. And maybe that was just a lack of understanding in some cases, and maybe in some cases it was purposeful. But I don't think it's exclusive to New York and Illinois and California. So
yeah, it's a good point, because I think that's a common misconception that the FMCSA is just targeting blue states here, because if you pull up the list, which I've got here shown on the screen for anybody tuned in, FMCSA is publishing a list of all of the states that they have issued a so-called preliminary determination of substantial noncompliance to, related to their issuance of non-domiciled CDLs. And you can see the list here. There's a list of 24 states that have received notices of noncompliance, and many of these are red states. And so even though the ones that have dominated the news cycle are the blue states, and they're the ones so far that have escalated to a point where FMCSA is withholding funds, to your point, Rob, there are several red states on this list as well that aren't doing things correctly in terms of how they issue these non-domiciled CDLs. So they are in the crosshairs as well, even though it's not as well publicized.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues with the whole state thing, it kind of goes. I think we're going to talk about that at some point too. Is the National Registry 2 piece? It's kind of like states kind of do what they want, but as long as they're receiving grant money from MSAP, they should be at least upholding federal standards. And I think some states prioritize certain things over other things when it comes to federal regulations. I mean, some are heavily enforcing ELP where some other states aren't enforcing it at all. And I don't think licensing standards any different than that. I think all states are kind of prioritizing whatever their administration may prioritize. So
Yeah, kind of along similar lines here. This was another story we ran that was pretty well publicized. Indiana revoked around 1,800 non-domiciled CDLs under its new state law after its kind of own independent review of its issuance of those types of licenses. We saw California finally get in line. They were, as I mentioned earlier, they were one of the states that originally got a bunch of funds withheld by the FMCSA, and they finally got their act together and canceled 13,000 non-domiciled CDLs that were improperly issued in California. So yeah, I mean, some states are being fairly proactive in this. I think, Brian, you saw another one come through recently, right?
Yeah, and to address Indiana's, it was a perfect storm when it came here. It really got a lot of news nationally, and then Indiana had two major crashes within like a 2 week period, both of which were well, one was a single fatality, one was multiple fatality. Both drivers were non-domiciled and so it was just the perfect storm for them to really push something through, and it was easy for them to do on the heels of those two crashes. But yeah, Iowa has put something in place now. I don't know if it's actually gone into law yet, and the big one on Iowa's is if a driver's caught in that state, not only will he receive a fine, but then the company loses the authority to operate in that state, which that could potentially be huge.
Yeah, that's the craziest
And then
thing that I saw. So Iowa's is still pending. Their state legislation on this topic still pending, but in the latest Senate version of that bill, they're pretty far along in the process, but in the latest version is a prohibition on operating in the state for carriers that are deemed non-compliant with the ELP law, meaning that the state is somehow going to prohibit even out-of-state carriers from operating in the state if they have certain violations of the ELP rules, which would be huge if that ultimately makes it into the final version of the bill. And, we were talking before we jumped on here, not exactly sure how that's going to be enforced in practice. But yeah, I mean, huge potential implications of violating Iowa's state law on the topic. We're also seeing some consistency in some of these state laws that are being passed. I'm looking right here at Indiana. So Indiana's law that got passed on ELP is imposing not only fines against drivers for who violate the ELP and also the non-domiciled CDL requirements, but also imposing potential fines of up to $50,000 for the employers that are hiring such drivers. And that $50,000 number seems to be one that is catching on in the various states that are contemplating legislation like this, from what I can tell.
Well, if you look at that one too, on the Indiana side, they're going to try to go back to the schools too. And anybody that received a CDL that was the instructors were ineligible, they're going to hit them with the big fine. And then the latest one we just saw yesterday, or that's when I saw it, was Idaho. Idaho just decided as of July 1st that they're just not issuing non-domicile CDLs anymore. They're done. They're out of the game. They're just not going to do it at all.
It wouldn't surprise me if we started to see more and more states take that approach, just because of the spotlight that's on the issue and the risk that it brings, that they're going to get their wrists slapped by FMCSA if they just say, all right, we're just not going to issue them anymore, particularly the states that don't issue a bunch of them. I can easily see them just saying we're just not going to issue them anymore. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Rob, any thoughts on non-domiciled CDLs other than what we've hit on here?
not really. I'm waiting to see what Virginia does to lower the standard to let more in, actually.
You think that's going to happen?
I mean, they're doing so many other crazy things here. I mean, I'm waiting on that to be next.
You're going to have to move to Indiana with me and Rob.
Yeah.
Or no, me
cheaper
and,
up there.
me and Brian and Jared and Tyler. Let's see. Actually, speaking of Jared, here he is. I've heard the Iowa bill is going to go all the way, putting motor carry-out services crazy. Just me on that. Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely crazy. I can't imagine that is going to find its way into the final law, but I don't know. I guess I've seen crazier things when it comes to legislation, so we'll have to wait
The
and
worst
see.
thing, well, the worst or best thing that could happen there is if they have some sort of crash while this is going on. That
Yeah, that
involves
would
a
for sure.
non-domiciled driver.
If that were to happen, it would push it over the line, probably.
It would.
Yeah, so certainly carriers in Iowa, you need to be on the lookout for that. But even for carriers that just have interstate operations that go through Iowa, I mean, that's something to keep on your radar as well. We're going to try and keep our eyes on that, and we'll update everyone as we get updates. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, that's something free you could do. Trucksafe.com/subscribe, and we push out regular updates on these types of topics. So that's a good place to be. All right. Next up on my list here is a recently announced overhaul of the data queues system. This is something we've been waiting on for a long time. It's something that the FMCSA had been toying around with for several years, sorely needed. Obviously, well, probably a big majority of the shows we've had, we have at one point in time or another complained about the data queue system and how poor of a system it is for motor carriers to use to challenge truly erroneous data. Just a poor substitute for due process. And it's a big problem, right? Because motor carriers, in some senses, their livelihood depends on the accuracy of the data in these systems, because their customers are looking at the data in the system and using it to make decisions of whether they want to continue doing business with them. If their scores are jacked up, they're not going to do business with them. Those scores are also influencing the cost of insurance for the motor carriers. They are also influencing whether the DOT is going to prioritize them for audit or not. And so having a system with inaccurate data in it is a big problem. And unfortunately, the system that we have as motor carriers to challenge that erroneous data is fundamentally broken and has been since its inception back in 2010. And the big problem is, as we've talked about ad nauseum, is, you file these data queues appeals, even with the best evidence that you have to show that the officer got something wrong, and they are just getting reviewed by the same agency that wrote the violation to begin with. And so the chances of you getting, the chances of you convincing them to change their mind on that are just slim. And so the industry as a whole has been clamoring for years for a revised system that has some semblance of due process baked into it. And FMCSA started thinking about this a few years back. They had originally proposed like an independent appeals board, which is really what the system needs, like an appeals board that's disinterested in the original violation. So not the same agency that wrote the violations, ideally somebody from FMCSA sitting on that board, and also some other disinterested parties, maybe other carriers, maybe drivers, that type of stuff, actually deciding the appeals. And that was thrown out there probably a couple of years ago as a proposal. Folks submitted comments on it. It never went anywhere. But the FMCSA more recently just announced within the last few weeks here a finalization of changes to the data queue system with a fairly significant overhaul, but not quite to the extent that most of us had hoped. They are not going forward with that independent appeals board. What they are doing is requiring the states to use their own 3-stage review process with certain deadlines upon which they have to act on requests that are filed, some independence requirements in the sense of not having the very same officer deciding the appeals that wrote up the original violation, but still can be within that agency. And then also a few other changes. So have you guys reviewed these changes? What are your thoughts on them? Brian, you probably deal with these most often.
Yeah, it's some of the states with smaller enforcement agencies. That was the biggest pushback as far as having the non someone not in that particular chain of command reviewing any of the challenges is they just didn't have anybody that could do it. Their agency wasn't that big. Everybody funneled up through the same reporting structure, and there wasn't anybody outside of that that would fit what originally was put out there. So, I think they did the best they could, and that was a topic. I was at CVSA, I think 2 years ago, and that was a topic then on how exactly can we do this when we don't have anybody else that can review these things. So I think they did the best they can. Is it perfect? No. It's a little bit better than what we had. So hopefully we'll see some positive change that way. But yeah, we do a lot of challenges, and any help we could get there was going to help.
So here's the timeline of what to expect with these changes. So states have 60 days after the publication of the notice. So I think it was published last week. So they have 60 days to submit a draft data queues implementation plan detailing how they're going to meet these new 3-stage appeals process requirements. The FMCSA is then going to provide feedback, and then the states have to finalize those plans within 120 days, with the requirements taking effect at 150 days post-publication. So we're looking at probably around September timeframe of when these changes will go into effect. Supposedly all of these approved state implementation plans are going to be publicly available on the Data Queues website. So if you're interested in seeing how these are going to roll out, that's the place to go. This is something else we'll be kind of watching closely and we'll report on as news comes out. Rob, any thoughts on this topic?
I mean, no, other than what y'all said, really. I mean, the due process piece of it, I think, is broken, and I think it still remains broken if you still have people at the same agency reviewing it. I mean, I like to think we're objective at Trucksafe, but if someone calls Trucksafe and says, "Hey, that guy Rob Carpenter is an idiot," obviously Brandon's going to come to me and ask me what happened in this situation, right? It's like not everyone can be that objective, and the other part of this is two pieces. One, I've probably gotten 4 calls in the past 2 months from insurance companies asking what they can do to actually get or to ensure law enforcement actually gives credit for good inspections, because a lot of these carriers are getting written up for the bad inspections, but if they pass, they're not getting that good inspection annotated on their record to help water down those bad inspections they've had in the past. And the other piece that's also kind of similar to that is states like Indiana will give you the violation, but won't give you the ticket that will help you beat it on a data queue challenge from an adjudication. So there's a lot of issues with this whole enforcement piece at the state level, not just the data queue side, but some other elements of the data queue side.
Uncle Jesse's asking, let's see here. Will they potentially allow an option for motor carriers to contest violations out of your control, like cited for picking up a nail in the road or something? I think, no, I don't ever see that happening. And the reason is I just don't know how they would ever be able to confirm that fact or not. In other words, when they're looking at things like flat tires, for example, how are they to know whether you picked up that nail while you were driving or if it was present when the driver should have caught it with a pre-trip inspection? That's just something that they're not going to know, so they're just going to write you up for that violation. And those are the types that, you just low likelihood of success on any kind of data queues appeals. I don't foresee them making any changes to that type of thing. Now, certainly, the data queue system as it exists currently has some options for contesting things that are legitimately not yours. Obviously, occasionally you will have violations put on your account where the officer may have just mistranscribed the DOT number or something. It obviously wasn't your violation, so it landed on your account. Or situations where you have terminated an owner-operator and now they're driving for another motor carrier under their DOT number, but they get tagged with a violation that lands on your account. There are options in the data queue system currently for you to contest that type of stuff, but you still have to provide evidence to show that, hey, look, we terminated this guy before the violation occurred, or this my truck wasn't even operating at that location at this time, that type of stuff. So there are options available for that, but not of the type that you mentioned there.
Yeah, two things on that. One, to the scenario you just said, we do get that quite often, and usually it's a company that's terminated an owner operator, but no verification that they pulled the DOT number off the side of the truck.
Yeah.
And you're going to have those violations. Your DOT number's on the side of that truck. So, and the other one that I think the one good piece in this rulemaking is a better clarification of why there was a denial.
Yeah.
Some states and officers do a great job saying this is exactly why I'm not changing it. Other ones just,
Denied.
case closed, denied, no corrections made. Okay, why?
Yeah.
So that at least gives us, if we
The
truly
why
have
is I didn't have time to read it, so I'm just denying it.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good one. At least it gives us, if we're going to take another shot at it, to get the proof that we need or the documentation that we need or something like that, is to fight why he said no in the first place.
Yeah. All right, so that's data queues changes. Let's see here. The last one I have on my list is another extension to the National Registry 2 waiver. So we've covered this on several other shows in the past. This is a waiver that has now been extended like 3 or 4 times that allows motor carriers and CDL drivers to continue to rely on a CDL driver's physical med card as proof of their physical qualifications, but only for 60 days after they get the new med card. Recall from previous episodes, if you've watched them, that this system is supposed to be moving towards a fully electronic system for CDL drivers, where the CDL driver goes and gets a new medical exam. The results of those exams get automatically uploaded to the National Registry of Medical Examiners and then electronically transmitted to their state licensing agency to get automatically associated with their driving record. That system has been in the works for 10 years now, and it was supposed to have flipped over to fully electronic last year. And it turned out that many states were not ready for it for whatever reason, and so weren't able to implement the changes to their IT systems. And so we've been living in kind of this waiver area where FMCSA has had to step in and grant temporary waivers to continue allowing motor carriers and CDL drivers to use the paper med cards for a period of time until all of the states get their act together. So right now, the waiver just got extended again until October 11th of 2026, after which it's going to be only electronic transmissions of the med cards for CDL drivers. The source of proof for whether a CDL driver is or is not medically qualified is going to be their driving record rather than the paper med cards that we've all become used to. For non-CDL drivers, it's not changing. They're still going to have the paper med cards. But yeah, just be aware that there are still, I want to say like 5 states that still don't have their act together. I've probably got it in this article here. Let's see what they are.
I mean, somebody could teach these people how to bind code. I mean, 10 years to just be able to upload a PDF, I've always thought was insane.
You'd think,
They're still using fax numbers over there, Rob.
I was kind of worried about this process. In January, I went and renewed my med card for the first time underneath this change. And I was kind of skeptical if it would actually be successful or not. So I actually called the DMV to follow up to actually make sure it worked. And it worked in Virginia. But I can see, like, is kind of broken as this system has been. I mean, it's skepticism is legitimate in this. I mean, I'd be concerned about it.
Well,
Yeah,
now
so-
in those states there, Brandon, when we were at ATA, the SSHR conference, they actually had dates when those states were supposed to come online. The very last one's going to be Alaska, but it seemed to me 2 of them were in July, and then I know 2 of them were in July. But yeah, they did have dates throughout this year that it is supposed to be all up and running.
Yeah,
Alaska had no date on it.
The 5 states still non-compliant are Alaska, California, Kentucky, Louisiana, and New Hampshire. So CDL drivers who are domiciled in those states are still having to rely on paper med cards exclusively until they get their act together. So, yeah, a problem.
To Rob's point, that MVR that a motor carrier is supposed to run 2 weeks after a driver goes in for his physical, that thing is critical.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you're going to know if it was successful.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of carriers who aren't keeping on top of this development, and they are going to find themselves in a lot of trouble once the paper med cards start to phase out, and then all of a sudden they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, which is to be running new MVRs to see the medical certifications on the drivers, the CDL driver's driving record. Yeah, it's going to be a big gap for a lot of carriers, I fear. Okay, anything else on the med card process, guys?
No.
All right. Somebody's asking here, did you speak on marijuana rescheduling? We haven't spoken on it here yet. We have a whole show dedicated to that. If you're interested, we had former head of the USDOT's Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy Compliance Office join us to talk about the potential impact of marijuana rescheduling. I haven't heard much about this since Trump announced the fast tracking of marijuana rescheduling. What's that been, guys? That's probably been 5 or 6 months ago now when he mentioned that, and it's been fairly quiet since then. It hasn't happened yet. As we talked about in depth in that prior show, I mean, our concern is that right now there seems to be no consideration for how that's going to potentially impact trucking. And that's a problem because right now, if you just dig into the regulations and the DOT's ability to mandate drug testing of the motor carriers that they regulate, it hinges pretty heavily on the scheduling of the drugs. And marijuana right now, Schedule I drug, gives the DOT the authority to mandate that motor carriers test for that as part of a DOT test. But if it gets rescheduled to a Schedule III drug, which is what is being contemplated, then there's an argument at least that the DOT is all of a sudden stripped of its authority to mandate marijuana testing as part of DOT testing. And so what we are expecting to happen, but which hasn't happened yet, is that the USDOT or somebody will step in and start to figure out how they're going to address that, and then they will address it. I would be surprised if we don't end up in the same position we're at now when all is said and done. In other words, a carve-out for regulated drivers that would still allow that would still mandate motor carriers to test them for marijuana. It would still consider that a positive test and would render them disqualified. I have to imagine that's where we're going to land, but it's kind of up in the air now. That's the status of it.
I always kind of looked at it like when you look at state DUI laws, like Virginia's is 0.08, but there's always been a carve out for CDL holders that's still 0.04. So I don't see it being really any different than that.
Oh, they're saying, bro, it's rescheduled. They announced it today. Yeah, apologies. I didn't see that. I've been on calls all day. So that's news to me. Jared's sending it to me right now. Let's read this online. Nothing like doing it live. We'll do it live. Justice Department places FDA-approved marijuana products and products containing marijuana subject to a qualifying state-issued license in Schedule III, strengthening medical research while maintaining strict federal controls. Let's see if this has anything in it. I'm not going to have time to read this all. Let me see if they have anything about USDOT or FMCSA or drivers. All right, that's kind of scary. Nothing coming up specific to DOT in this announcement. So I don't know. I'm going to have to go and dig into what this means, and we'll have to figure that out. What I'm noticing just from the title of this, first and foremost, is this looks to be specific to medicinal marijuana use, so not to recreational. So even though it is rescheduled, it would only be rescheduled for medicinal marijuana, not for recreational use. So that's the first thing to know, is that the only potential impact then would be for drivers who are prescribed marijuana for a particular ailment. That would be the group that would be potentially affected by this. But yeah, still kind of an open question then how this is going to impact trucking. Yeah, thanks everybody for pointing that out. Lori is saying INDASA is working with legislatures to have a carve out for safety sensitive that would allow them to continue testing. Yeah, that was my understanding when we had a specific show on this a while back as to what INDASA was working on. So I don't know what their status is with it. Breaking news. You heard it here, folks.
Yeah. I mean, worst case, if you fail, you can always just go get one of the fake saps out of North Carolina to get yourself out of the trouble.
Yeah, that was a crazy thing too. Talk about that. You wrote a whole article on that. That kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, I had kind of heard of it, but I never actually saw it in this. And so there was a guy who was in the clearinghouse. He had failed a test, got in the clearinghouse in a prohibited status, got in touch with somebody in one of the SAP groups. I happen to be in like 8 of them. I've never been in the clearinghouse in a prohibited status, but anyway, he gets this guy to get him out, clear his 5th and 6th step in the clearinghouse. So apparently you can actually, just like everything else in the industry, you can self-attest that you are a credentialed SAP in the clearinghouse, and you can actually clear people to go out of the clearinghouse. So when we figured it out, initially with the first guy, this specific gentleman that cleared himself or had somebody clear him, we figured he cleared like 1 out of every 85 out of the system for the whole clearinghouse, everybody who's been returned to duty. But once we actually got the whole network, we ran the story, and he called and he told on everybody. So once we actually broke down the rest of the network, it was actually more like 1 out of every 8 that were cleared in the clearinghouse were cleared by this network from Colorado, North Carolina, Texas. And they were basically just selling, hey, get out of the clearinghouse free cards for
how many roughly?
$500.
How many roughly was this? How many people affected?
I got to look back at the aggregate number, but it was
thousands, right?
Thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the thousands. I read the article that you put out, Rob. It was it 6,000? Something like that. It was a big number.
Well, we had to run like a Python scraper through Facebook groups and actually pull messages from people. So it's really a rough number because we were actually pulling like self-proclaimed, hey, this guy got me out of SAP. He can help you get out. So that's how we actually came up with the number, but it was a lot.
That's crazy. It doesn't inspire much confidence in the system, unfortunately, but just another gap that the FMCSA is going to have to fill.
Yeah. When I went into the system, I went into the clearinghouse to see, like, all right, what does it actually take to get set up as a SAP? It just asks you, are you credentialed? And then when you actually go to clear the return to duty test for the 6th step, it just asks you for a date. It doesn't ask you to upload a certified negative result, nothing like that. It's just give us the date and you're good to go. So that's how a lot of these guys were getting out of the system. So you've got a lot of drivers out there. And actually this guy, he was removed illegally from the clearinghouse. Then he started selling as part of this pyramid scheme these $100 to $500 get out of the clearinghouse free cards. And then I think last year, like August, he got arrested driving a tractor trailer for a carrier in Mississippi. And when I talked to the investigator down there who arrested him, he said he was tweaking so hard that they had to carry him from the tractor trailer to the back of the police car to actually get him to the hospital.
Yikes.
So anyway, it's a pretty wild story.
Well, I mean, that all just wrapped up with a topic I guess we can end on here today, which is the self-certification problems that we're seeing with all of these different components of the federal safety regulations that rely on a self-certification process. I'm thinking things like the electronic logging device list of self-certified devices, the medical examiner self-certification, apparently the SAP self-certification, the entry-level driver training, self-certification list. This is just the nature of how we have the system set up currently. And I get why we did it. And it goes right back to what we've already talked about, which is the staffing issues at the federal level and the budgetary issues that apparently have prevented them from, their own oversight over these particular areas of compliance. They've kind of outsourced it to the market. But clearly this is being exploited by bad actors. And so I know at least the current FMCSA administrator, Derek Bars, has acknowledged this as a problem in some of the speeches that he's given, the self-certification process, and how he's not a fan of it at all. And he wants to work towards moving away from it. Now, how that will play out or when it will play out, obviously, is up in the air. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, big issue, creating a lot of problems in a lot of different areas for sure.
Well, I mean, even your instant issue insurance policies that, became popular, they're relying on the data that you enter in that system at the time, because there isn't a traditional underwriter there, right? Like you're going on this website, self-proclaiming who you are, how well you can drive, and what your record is, and what you operate, and what you own, and then they're giving you a quote based on what you tell them. So I actually have a call this week with someone who was insuring a chameleon carrier who had 1,000 trucks, who only had like 100 trucks on the policy, and every time they would crash, they would hold off reporting the crash, and then they would add them to the policy, wait a month, and then file the claim. And there's a whole deal with this. It's not just ELDTs and ELD, it's everything. And it even goes down to drivers. I mean, when we go to get our physicals done, we have to fill out a long form that's self-attestation. Are you healthy or not? Have you ever had these issues? Have you ever been dependent on drugs and alcohol? I mean, who's going to answer yes to that question when this is going to determine whether I get to keep my job or not for the next 2 years, and I'm going to answer no to all these questions.
I guarantee you there's been some people that have answered yes to that.
Yes. Yeah, I imagine there has.
And they still have a license.
Yeah. That's the other problem. Okay, guys, we're about out of time here. Thanks for everybody for tuning in today. Appreciate you joining us. I think we're going to try and do some more of these types of shows where we just interact with folks in attendance, answer any questions you have, address any kind of hot button issues that are sitting out there. And
let us know what time of day would be the best too.
Yeah, let us know if you have thoughts on time of day, particular days that work better, how you would like to see it structured. We want to make these more useful for people that watch regularly. So yeah, do that. You could also check out our prior episodes over at trucksafelive.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast wherever you happen to get your podcast. And we'll hope to catch you at a next one. See you guys. That's all we got. Later.